What do you do when you have everything money can buy, yet nothing that can quiet the loneliness inside your chest? That was the question Elena Hartwell lived with every day as she stood at her kitchen window, watching the early Montana sunlight stretch across Meadowbrook Ranch. The white fence posts stood tall and straight, like silent soldiers guarding her land. A place that once felt like freedom now felt like a wide, beautiful cage. She was 42, a widow for 3 months, and the silence in her home had become the heaviest thing she carried. Her husband Charles had died in a sudden riding accident, leaving behind nearly $8 million in cattle, oil shares, and real estate. Her lawyers told her she was set for life, but money did nothing to fill the space he left behind in their house, or in the bed that now felt too large for one person. The sound of heavy boots on her porch made her freeze. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her closest neighbor lived miles away. She moved the lace curtain with careful fingers, and her breath caught. A giant stood on her porch. He was so tall he had to duck a little under the overhang. His denim shirt was faded, his jeans worn, and his boots scuffed. His shoulders looked wide enough to block the morning sun. His face was rough, tanned from long days outdoors, and his hat was bent from too much use. But his green eyes, those struck her the most. They were desperate in a way that made her heart clench. Elena opened the door slowly. She had to tilt her chin up to meet his eyes. "Ma'am," he said, removing his hat. His thick brown hair was messy, like it hadn't seen a comb in days. "My name is Jake Sullivan. I heard about your husband passing. And I need work." Instinct told her to close the door. This man was far too large, far too unknown, and she was alone on a wide and empty ranch. But something in his voice, something tired and honest, made her pause. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "I'm not hiring. I'm thinking of selling the ranch." Jake's face fell so fast her chest tightened. For a moment, this enormous man looked as lost as a child. "Please," he said quietly. "I've been out of work for 2 months. The Henderson Ranch closed down. I've got nowhere else. I can fix fences, work cattle, repair equipment. I don't drink. I don't pick fights. I just need a chance." His hands shook slightly as he held his hat. That detail hit her harder than anything he said. This wasn't a man asking for a job. This was a man trying to survive. "Where are you staying?" Elena asked. Jake shifted, embarrassed. "My truck. Sometimes the shelter in Billings when it gets too cold." The truth hit her like a stone dropped onto a kitchen table. Plain, solid, undeniable. A man this strong, this capable, sleeping in a truck because no one would give him a chance. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan," she whispered, "but I can't." Before she could finish, Jake did something that shocked her so deeply she nearly stepped back. He dropped to one knee. This massive man, 6'8", arms like tree trunks, shoulders like a barn door, knelt on her porch like a knight begging for mercy. "Please," he said, voice breaking, "I'll work for half wages, just room and board. I swear I'll prove myself. Just give me a chance." The sight rattled her, not because it was frightening, but because it was heartbreaking. This man was proud, she could see that. Yet here he was, kneeling for a chance to sleep indoors. "Get up," Elena said softly. "Please, stand up." Jake rose slowly, his cheeks red with shame. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to scare you. I just didn't know what else to do." Elena battled with her thoughts. She shouldn't let him stay. Every warning sign flashed in her mind. But loneliness had a way of softening a heart, especially when she saw how close this man was to losing everything. "There's an old bunkhouse out back," she said quietly. "It hasn't been used in years. If you need a place for a few days while you look for work, you can stay there." Jake blinked like he couldn't believe she'd said it. Then relief washed over his face so deep she almost looked away from the raw emotion of it. "Thank you," he said thickly. "Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down." Quote. As he walked to the bunkhouse, shoulders squared with new purpose, Elena stood on the porch with her heart climbing into her throat. Had she made a mistake? In the days that followed, Jake worked like a man carrying the weight of the world. He repaired 3 damaged fence sections, cleaned the barn she'd avoided since Charles died, and fixed a water pump that had troubled her for months. He didn't complain. He didn't rest. He didn't waste a second. He removed his shirt in the afternoon heat, sweat shining across the muscles of his back and arms. Elena found herself watching from her window, her heart fluttering with a feeling she hadn't felt since her husband died. And the guilt came fast. How could she be drawn to a stranger? How could she feel anything so soon after losing Charles? On the 7th evening, Jake knocked on her door, hat in hand, like always. "Ma'am," he said, "I just wanted to thank you for letting me stay this week. I don't want to overstay my welcome." The thought of him leaving hit her harder than she expected. "Have you found other work?" she asked. He looked down. "No ranch wants a man without references." "Why don't you have any?" Jake hesitated. Shame flickered in his eyes. "There was an incident," he said quietly, "at my last job." Her stomach tightened. "What kind of incident?" Jake lifted his eyes to hers, full of hurt. "The rancher's daughter kept trying to get close to me. She was married. When I pushed her away, her husband walked in. They blamed me. I was fired on the spot." Elena felt something surprising. Not fear, not disgust, jealousy. Jake saw the emotion on her face and stepped back quickly. "I didn't do anything wrong, I swear it." "I believe you," Elena said softly. He froze. She didn't know why she said it. She just knew it was true. "Stay," she whispered. "Work for me. Live here. I'll pay you fair wages." The giant's eyes filled with tears. You mean it?" Quote, "I do." As Jake walked back to the bunkhouse that night, Elena felt her heart racing for a reason she didn't want to admit. Because for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. The storm rolled in fast, carrying cold wind across the open fields. Thunder growled over Meadowbrook Ranch as Elena stepped out of her car, her coat whipping around her legs. She had spent the afternoon in town meeting her lawyer, going over plans to sell off a few business assets from Charles's estate. The long drive home had left her tired, but the sight that greeted her as she entered the house pushed everything else from her mind. Jake stood in her kitchen, dripping wet from head to toe. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his denim shirt soaked through, clinging to his powerful frame. Water pooled at his boots. His hands shook slightly from cold. "Jake?" Elena rushed toward him. "What happened?" He tried to smile, but his teeth chattered. "Roof's leaking in the bunkhouse. I've been trying to fix it since noon. Rain's coming down too hard." Elena stared at him, horrified. "You were out there in this storm?" He shrugged as if it didn't matter. Didn't want the bed to get soaked. "It's the only one I've got." A crack formed in her chest. "You can't stay out there tonight," she said, grabbing a towel and pressing it firmly into his hands. "You'll get sick." "I'll be fine," Jake murmured. "I don't want to trouble you." "You're not sleeping in that bunkhouse," Elena said firmly. "You'll stay in the guest room." End of discussion. Jake froze, towel halfway raised. I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" she asked, frowning. He lifted his eyes to hers. The look stopped her breath. "Because," he said softly, "I'm in love with you." The towel slipped from her fingers. She had known. Somewhere deep inside, she had known. But hearing the words out loud made her pulse thunder. She took a step back without meaning to. "Jake," her voice came out as a whisper, "you can't say things like that." "I know I shouldn't," he said, his voice stronger now. "But it's the truth. I know you're grieving. I know this is wrong in every way people talk about wrong. But I can't pretend anymore." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Jake, this can't happen. You work for me. People will talk. My husband hasn't been gone long." "Let them talk," he said, stepping closer, not threatening but honest. "I don't care what they say. I care about you." Elena backed up until her spine touched the wall. Her hands trembled. "This is wrong," she whispered. "Or you're afraid," Jake said softly. The truth struck with painful accuracy. Elena was afraid. Afraid of judgment, of gossip, of falling for a man who could break her heart simply by walking away. Afraid of how alive she felt when he looked at her. "I need you to leave," she whispered. Jake's face fell, but he nodded. "I'll pack my things in the morning." Her chest twisted sharply. No, don't leave the ranch. Just keep your distance." Jake's jaw tightened with hurt, but he nodded once and walked out into the rain, the door closing softly behind him. The next weeks were torture. Jake worked harder than ever. He barely spoke to her beyond necessary exchanges, and Elena found herself missing his voice, his presence, the warmth he brought to her quiet world. She caught herself looking for him out the window, waiting for him in the evenings, listening for the sound of his boots. But Jake kept to himself, and the ranch felt empty again. Then Patricia arrived. Elena's sister-in-law stormed into the house like she owned the place, her sharp eyes scanning everything with cold judgment. She never liked Elena, not even when Charles was alive. And now she had ammunition. "Who is that man?" Patricia asked, her voice dripping with disdain as she watched Jake repair a fence. "He looks like he could snap you in half." "Where did you find him?" "He needed work," Elena replied stiffly. Patricia's lips twisted. "So you just let a giant drifter live on your land? Are you insane?" "People are talking, Elena. They're saying you're sleeping with the help." Heat burned Elena's cheeks. "That's ridiculous." Patricia folded her arms. "Fire him before this becomes a scandal." That evening, Elena found herself at the bunkhouse door, heart heavy. Jake opened it immediately, surprise flashing across his face. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said gently. "Everything all right? We need to talk." Inside, she saw the neat, simple way he lived. A bed, a table, a few books. This tiny space was his whole world. "People are talking," she said quietly, "about us, about the situation." Jake's expression hardened. "Let them." "I can't," Elena whispered. "My reputation, Charles's memory." "So you're firing me," Jake said, his voice flat. Elena swallowed hard, tears burning her eyes. "I think it would be best." Silence filled the room, heavy, sharp, suffocating. Jake stood still for a moment, breathing slowly, jaw tight. He looked like she had just struck him across the face. "I understand," he said quietly. Elena turned to leave, her heart ripping with every step, until Jake's voice cut through the silence. What if there was another way? She turned, confused. "What do you mean?" Jake stepped forward. His hands shook, his breath trembled, and then he dropped to one knee. But this time, the gesture wasn't about work. It was about her. "Marry me," he said. Elena's heart stopped. "Jake." "I know how it sounds," he rushed out. "I know I'm not good enough for you. I know you're grieving. I know people will call you crazy. But I love you, Elena. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. And I think you feel something too." Her knees wobbled. "Jake, I can't." "Please," he whispered, voice cracking. "Let me stay. Let me work for you. Let me give you a life again. I can make you happy. I can give you a family. I can even—" He swallowed hard, cheeks turning red. "I can even get you pregnant again." The world went still. Elena stared at this giant man on his knees, offering everything he had, his heart, his loyalty, his future children, and she felt the ground shift under her feet. "Get up," she whispered. "Not until you answer me," Jake said, his eyes full of hope and fear. Her voice trembled. "This is insane." "Or the most honest thing either of us has ever faced," he whispered. His eyes held hers, and in that moment she saw everything. The man who slept in a truck. The man who worked until his hands bled. The man who knelt on her porch begging for a chance. The man who loved her with a sincerity she had never known. "Maybe I am crazy," she whispered. Jake's breath caught. "Is that a yes?" Before she could answer, her voice cracked under the weight of everything inside her, and her world changed. Elena did not sleep that night. She lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling as Jake's kneeling figure replayed again and again in her mind. His voice, his trembling hands, his confession, his promise. Every part of it sat in her chest like a burning coal she didn't know how to hold or set down. When the morning sun came through her curtains, she finally rose, put on her coat, and walked to the bunkhouse with a heart pounding so loudly she felt it in her throat. Jake opened the door before she even knocked. He looked rough, eyes tired, shoulders tense, like he had spent the entire night waiting, ready to accept her answer, no matter how much it broke him. "Elena," he said quietly. She took a shaky breath. "Yes," she whispered. Jake froze. For a long moment he just stared at her, disbelief flickering across his face. "Yes," he repeated, voice unsteady. She nodded. "I'm saying yes." His breath left him in a single sweep, like he had been holding it for years. Then something softened in his expression. Something warm, grateful, and overflowing with quiet relief. He didn't rush her. He didn't grab her. He just stepped closer with gentle slowness, giving her space to change her mind, giving her room to breathe. "Elena," he whispered again. "Thank you." Within a week they were married, just a simple courthouse wedding in Billings. No crowd, no gossiping neighbors, no fancy dress. Elena wore blue. Jake wore the only suit he had ever owned. Their hands shook when they signed the papers, not from doubt, but from the weight of the moment. When they walked out into the sunlight, Jake took her hand like it was the most precious thing he had ever held. And it was. By the time they drove back to Meadowbrook Ranch, everyone in the county knew. Phones rang. Messages came. Patricia called 3 times, each one sharper than the last. "You've lost your mind," she snapped. "Marrying a man you barely know? A man with nothing?" Elena looked across the kitchen where Jake was cooking dinner, humming quietly, moving around her house like he belonged there. When he caught her eye, he smiled, that soft, grateful smile that always melted her. "I didn't lose my mind," Elena told Patricia calmly. "I finally found my life." Even Patricia was quiet after that. As the weeks passed, their home changed. Jake settled into the main house, but he did not try to take over her world. He moved carefully, always asking what she needed, always treating her with gentle respect. He fixed everything she had ignored since Charles died. He brought life back into rooms she hadn't stepped into for months. And at night, when Elena lay in bed, Jake held her like she was something fragile and priceless. He loved her with a tenderness that surprised her, a patience she didn't expect from a man built like a wall of stone. Being with him didn't feel wrong. It felt like she had finally woken up. 3 months later, Elena stared at a white plastic stick in the bathroom. 2 pink lines. Clear as day. Her breath caught and the tears blurred her vision before she could stop them. Jake found her there, sitting on the floor with shaking hands. "Elena, sweetheart, what's wrong?" She handed him the test. Jake froze. His eyes traced the 2 lines. His lips parted. We're. He dropped to his knees so fast she didn't even see him move. His large hands cupped her cheeks. His forehead rested against hers. "Are we really having a baby?" he whispered. Elena nodded, tears falling. "Yes." He pressed his face to her stomach, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for letting me love you. Thank you for giving me a family." Elena ran her fingers through his hair, her heart full. It was real now. Their marriage, their future, their love. Word spread quick. People whispered. People judged. People wondered. But for the first time in Elena's life, she didn't care. Jake cared only about her and the unborn child they had created. He spent every day thinking of ways to make their ranch better for the future. He worked harder than ever, but now with joy instead of desperation. Every night he talked to her belly, telling the baby stories, hopes, dreams. Elena would watch him, her heart swelling with a quiet love that felt deeper than anything she'd known with Charles. Not because Charles had been bad, but because Jake had come into her life when her soul was empty and filled every hollow space with warmth. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sky fade pink and orange, Jake took her hand gently. "I never thought I would have this," he said softly. "Have what?" Elena asked. "A home, a family, someone who loves me." She leaned into his shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this either." Jake turned to her, eyes warm, deep, full of steady devotion. "I love you." There was no fear in his voice anymore. No tremble, no desperation, just truth. Elena squeezed his hand. "And I love you." A cool breeze swept across the ranch. The baby kicked softly. Jake smiled with wonder, placing his huge hand over her stomach. as if protecting both of them at once. As stars began to glow across the Montana sky, Elena realized how strange life could be. She once believed she had everything: wealth, land, security. But she hadn't known love, real love, honest love, unexpected love. It had arrived as a giant man sleeping in a truck, kneeling on her porch, begging for work. Now he was her husband, the father of her child, her partner, her heart. The giant who once had nothing now had everything, and Elena knew she would never be lonely again.